Welcome back to Apple Cottage. This is Sandy, and I am Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming. Let's gardening together. I have a cup of chai tea, so I hope you have your tea with you. And with gardening together today, we're going to talk about propagation of African violets. Here is one that needs repotted. So I started with the propagation of just this leaf. And actually, this leaf has grown since I put it into this pot. And I started this in October. One of my fellow master gardeners had an educational class at the end of one of our meetings, and she talked about propagation of African violets. And so all of us got to do a couple of them. Here's my other one. So we took a leaf, we trimmed it a little bit, and then on the stalk we did a slice with a scalpel. Planted it in the soil, put it in the snow globe. These came from the dollar store. And I just let it sit in indirect light. It was warm, but it never got direct, hard sunlight. And pretty soon it started making these little hairs. It almost looks sometimes like this little greenish glow, like you might even think it was starting to mold at first. It's not. And then pretty soon, the little babies started coming up, and the leaf just kept getting bigger, and it kept getting taller. It was not at all tall like this before. And to where it was actually rubbing on the top of the snow globe. And I never opened it up. The soil was moist when it went in, and I never opened it. And so it just made condensation. And it just became, it had enough air in there and carbon dioxide, and it had enough moisture, and it just sat there, and it just did its magic. A lot of you probably remember when your mother or grandmother had African violets. They're such a lovely plant, especially in the wintertime when nothing else is blooming. And all of a sudden, you have all these blooms with African violets. And right now, you can get African violets in stores. I think it's because people want some blooms. It's cold, it's yucky. It's freezing here in Wyoming today. The temperature says 23, but the wind is blowing so hard. I'm sure it's 0 or below 0 with the wind chill factor. But I'm going to move the camera down, and we are going to repot these. Now, African violets basically always want to be root bound. So I'm going to take the snow globe that this one was in. I have another one right here too. And I'm going to turn this over. I'm just going to put my fingers through there, and I'm going to turn that over and tap it. And look at all those lovely roots. And because they want to always be root bound, the first pot that they're going to go in is just these little tiny terracottas. Eventually I'll move them to about a 3 or 4 inch pot, but I don't want to do that yet. I have some African violet mix, and I bought this. It's by Schultz. It works well, but if it wasn't so snowy and blowy and my shed was snowed in, I would get some more Vermiculite and Perlite, just so that it has more fluff to it. Now, Vermiculite and Perlite do 2 different things, so don't think that you can choose one or the other. Perlite just lets more airspace, and Vermiculite holds water. But you want it really nice and fluffy, okay? So I'm going to take the pot, and I'm just going to sprinkle that in there. Sorry, dogs are barking. Reagan! See how that is? I'm not compacting it. So then we have to take our African violet apart. And so not every leaf is a plant, but the little clumps are different plants. So we're just going to slowly start breaking that away from the mother plant. And you want to be gentle with this. There it goes. So So see, it still has a lot of root system in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just gently pushing that so that I have a space that that can go into. But one of the tricks is no compaction. Put a little bit more around there. Now the soil is already moistened, so I don't have to water it. And I have a little tiny greenhouse, and I'm going to set those in there. Okay, and then we're going to take another one. So gently just putting those in there. No compaction. And so we still have, I'm going to see if I can just really get the soil away from this so you can see this. Because they're attached to the mama plant still. And so you are breaking them from her. There we go. So see, she has some leaves, or some roots, so I can plant her. And then we have 2 more plants. So out of that one propagation, I am going to get 4 African violets. So I'm going to stop the video and I'm going to pot these all up, and then I'm going to show you what they look like. So here are all the plants that we got. Move the camera a little bit. So out of the 2 leaves, we got 8 plants. Now, of course, I don't need 8 African violets, so I will, when they get a little bit bigger, I'll give some of them away. But this was the mama plant that the stem was so long, and so I buried her deeply, because that's what you want to do. Now, even though my soil was moist, they're sitting in just a little teeny bit of water, and for a total of about ½ hour, I'll let that, then I'll dump out that water. Now, these are the babies from the second plant. They weren't as big as the first plant. So those are going to go back in the snow globes. Just because I want a really good, stable environment for them. These ones over here, I have a lid, and so those will go on top of that. So they'll be in a greenhouse also. But they're larger, and so they will grow faster. Now you always must remember that African violets get watered from below, not from above. With the exception, about once a year, you want to take your plant, not water on the leaves, but on the soil all the way around. And you just want to really just water and water and water, because what you want it to do is leach out if there's any buildup of fertilizers or salts, anything. You want that soil to just become good and pure again. And so that's just a rule of thumb. Another thing to remember is I won't repot this, because until this is completely root bound and the plant above is 2 to 3 times larger than this pot, because they want to be root bound. And that is no matter what size you have your African violet, a 3-inch pot or a 4-inch pot, never larger than that. You want it to be root bound, and that plant can get 2 to 3 times larger than this pot, and that is perfect. Now, every so often when your plant is large, you should take it out of this pot, trim off some of the excess roots, add some fresh soil in there, and put it back in the exact same pot, because a 3 to 4-inch pot is perfect for an African violet. And it really doesn't take that long for them to get that size. But these ones, I will wait till this little plant is 2 to 3 times larger than this pot, and then I'll repot it into its forever pot. When I repot it, I am gonna, in the mix, I'm gonna add a lot more perlite and vermiculite, just because it's gonna be a forever pot, and I think it's important that it has that moisture retention and it has airspace for those roots to go through. And
then your African violet will live for years and years and years. In fact, I know a gal that has an African violet that wasn't from her mother, it was from her grandmother, and has lived all these years. And she's taken great care of it. She's done the maintenance for it. But there's such a beautiful plant that bloom different times during the year. And if your African violet isn't blooming, take it out of the pot. But trim off some of those leaves, add some fresh soil in there. Make sure that the main stalk, I guess I would call it a trunk almost, is not too large, because you want to bury that down if it is. And that can stimulate it to flower. And they want to somewhat dry out. If you put your finger down in the soil a half an inch and it's dry, then you could water it. But don't over soak it or it will rot. But they're just a lovely plant. So when mine get bigger, I will figure out a way I can give some of them away and ship them, because I'm sure I can ship them somehow. Overnight them or something. But this is Sandy at Apple Cottage. Now remember, on Friday nights, I have the Women in Our Lives. And this Friday is my last episode of that. I'm going to talk about my mom. I've had 5 episodes, and I could literally, there's so many women in my life that have been influencing me, and I could go on and on. But I think a series can get too long. And so try an African violet. Go with some of your friends and buy one, and then propagate them, because they're very easy. You know, you're going to break off a leaf, trim it off so that you're cutting part of the leaf off. In fact, probably this one you can see that even more. See how I trimmed part of that off? Even though in the snow globe it grew bigger. It's just so it doesn't have to have so much energy going to the plant, and it can have energy to make the roots. And then I just took a scalpel and sliced about a 60-degree angle. It was a pretty long slice, and that gets buried into the soil. So they're just a fabulous plant to have. Oh, little side note. I am now the official Wyoming State Master Gardener President for 2020 and 2021. Last year and the year before, I was the local Campbell County Master Gardener President, which was so fun. We have such a great bunch of women. And actually we have some men that are Master Gardeners too. But I thought this would just open some opportunities, and I would learn so many things from women and gardeners, men and women gardeners around the state. And I'm just really excited about that. So I hope you have a great day. Stay warm, stay safe. It's freezing here, but it's warm inside. And propagate an African violet.